today. I'm joined by Daniel Lippman, a reporter covering the White House in Washington, D.C. for Politico. Thanks so much for joining us on this cold morning. We have to mention the cold. It's -5 degrees Celsius in the 20s Fahrenheit. We're feeling it, but it's also moved the ceremony indoors, denying Donald Trump perhaps the spectacle he would have liked, having tens of thousands of people line the mall. Just a few hundred people now in the rotunda. How different will this inauguration look to 2017?
Well, in 2017, you had the inauguration, and then the next day, Sean Spicer, the press secretary, had to say this was the largest crowd ever. And the crowd sizes were a big aspect in terms of telling a lie on day one of that White House. Here, they really wanted to protect all the people who were coming from around America, including the South, where these types of temperatures are not normal. But it's definitely going to kind of be a mood shift, because you could have a million people on the National Mall. Inside the Capital One Arena, I think the capacity is 20,000. And so that is going to put a damper on some of the activities after they had, the walk along Pennsylvania Avenue is one of the traditions that presidents have had since Jimmy Carter.
That's right. He was one of the first to walk the parade route, wasn't he?
And so I'm sure Trump is. What was interesting about yesterday is that he spoke to his supporters at an arena in Washington, and usually presidents don't give a preview of their inauguration speech. They stay quiet that same weekend. And so we're expecting when he does speak to his Capital One Arena supporters today, he may even have a desk where he signs some executive orders, marking his presidency and beginning his term.
I mean, one thing that cold has done is it's helped the security situation by moving the event indoors. I mean, we are surrounded by snipers here on the rooftops. 11,000 police and National Guard troops deployed around the city. This is a president who has already survived 2 assassination attempts. Do you think security was a contributing factor, or was it simply cold and that has helped the security situation?
I think it was mostly the cold. He didn't want his supporters to get angry at him. He likes to have them stay loyal. It's interesting is like it's very hard to get a car from downtown DC to people's houses last night. So I was on the metro, and even someone who was a chief of staff to Biden when he was a senator, who's now a lobbyist, he was on the train because there was a big candlelight dinner last night with all the donors. There was Mark Zuckerberg there. There was Vivek Ramaswamy. There was lots of the corporate America has really shown that they're not going to resist Trump this time, that they are going to acquiesce. And they realize that they don't want to be the target of his, not retribution, but if you work in the renewable energy space, in the technology space, you have a lot of interplay with the government. And so these companies are being smart to their shareholders, frankly.
Well, I mean, if you look at the guest list, it's a real who's who of tech billionaires. You mentioned the Zuckerbergs, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Sam Altman. President Biden, in his farewell speech during the week, warned of a sort of oligarchy of the wealthy elite taking over Washington. How much influence do you think the likes of Elon Musk will have in this next administration?
I think that Elon will have a lot of influence. There's a question about Vivek Ramaswamy, who was who ran for president in 2024, was defeated in the primary by Trump, of course. He may run for Ohio governor instead of being Elon's number 2 guy at the DOGE, which is the Department of Government Efficiency, which is this kind of non-governmental entity that they want to have, find the spending cuts in the federal budget to cut $1 trillion or $2 trillion, which is going to be very hard for them to do. But I think it is ironic that you have Trump, who has all these middle class and working class supporters, be surrounded by these billionaires and wealthy Americans exerting influence. 2 days ago, I was at a party at a yacht, a multi-million-dollar yacht filled with Trump supporters, which is not.
Lucky you! Look at you.
So these thank you. People, not every Trump supporter is going to be on that yacht, or has even been on a yacht, and so there is a contrast because a big part of Trump's agenda is to extend the tax cuts, which mostly the vast majority of that money goes to the wealthy. And so there is this kind of dichotomy.
I mean, this is the one thing that fascinates me is how did a wealthy New Yorker from a family fortune, he's been bankrupt 4 times, he's a convicted criminal, how has he tapped into grassroots America? What is it about Donald Trump that resonates with so many Americans this time?
It's quite striking because ever since he walked down that escalator, I think there's a lot of working class and middle class Americans who have felt like they finally have someone who is speaking up for their interests. And I think he has a chip on his shoulder. He was not, the Manhattan elite hated him. And so a lot of Americans feel like with all of the income inequality in this country, a lot of the jobs have gone to, manufacturing jobs have gone to Mexico or to China or Asia. And so the cost of living has soared over the last few years. That he was the only person who was really like feeling like they have an advocate, and so you can question how effective he is, but he doesn't talk down to Americans, and he doesn't. There's a sense that he wants to fight for Americans, and they feel like the standard of living and their children's future is kind of out of, it's much diminished over the last 30 years of globalization. People thought America would become a much more, prosperous society. But there was a poll that said Americans making $250,000 a year, a third of them are living paycheck to paycheck. So even wealthy people who are, if you have to make hundreds of thousands of dollars in New York City to send your kids to good schools, because a lot of people they look at the public education system. They don't think that America's always lower in the scores than many European countries, and they're thinking, hey, this is the richest country on the earth. Why is this happening?
I mean, there seems to be so much frustration against the Biden administration during the election, such a backlash. And obviously Trump was voted in on immigration and the economy. Those were the two sort of key issues. You mentioned his speech overnight. He's due to give his official inaugural speech in a few hours. But we got a little taste of it last night when he addressed supporters at the rally here in D.C. What do you think we can expect to see from his first 100 days in office?
So he's going to sign a slew of executive orders. He's already a lame duck president because he can't run for re-election. It's not like you get a third term just because your first term was interrupted by Biden. And so I think we're going to see a rapid series of executive orders on sending illegal immigrants to Mexico, on rolling back some of Biden's clean energy rules, on trying to make a deal with Ukraine. He said he would have a deal on day one, or even before he was president, and so we're still waiting on that. And we'll have to see if he has to exert his diplomatic weight to keep the Israel-Hamas deal to extend that permanently after it expires after its first phase.
Yeah, of course, this inauguration all takes place as we see that Gaza ceasefire and hostage deal play out. Trump said the deal would never have happened without him. How much of a role do you think Trump played in that?
Well, he didn't. He wasn't negotiating with Hamas and Qatar, so. But he did send his Middle East peace envoy, Steve Witkoff, to Israel and to meet with Netanyahu and to really put the screws on Hamas as well. So people talk about how Trump is so pro-Israel, which is true, but he was telling Netanyahu, hey, you have to make this deal. It's going to be embarrassing to me if this war is continuing on my watch. When he's seen all the human suffering. And he actually got a lot of Arab Americans who supported him. And so they were looking for something like this. And the Biden administration's constant negotiations and flights over to the region just did not, it was almost like a talking shop. When that's not the purpose is not to just talk, it's to help save lives and release the hostages and to rebuild Gaza and to rush humanitarian aid in. And so I'm sure there's some Gazans who are thankful to President-elect Trump for the next few hours because of that deal. And it was give him a leverage point. It's negotiations can go on forever unless you have a deadline.
It'll be interesting to see just what his foreign policy goals are this time. I mean, he said during campaigning he wants to end all wars, but the concern here is that he wants to end them on whose terms?
Yeah, that's a real. There's a lot of Ukrainians who are worried that he'll sell Ukraine down the river and that he'll make a deal with Russia that does not serve Ukraine's interests. There's Republicans who are conservative people like Lindsey Graham, the senator from South Carolina, who are worried that Trump may make a deal with Iran and on whose terms as well. Do we get, Trump is not always, he doesn't know all the he doesn't read 30-page policy binders. And so he's more of a bigger picture guy. And so you have Republican senators saying, hey, we should bomb Iran, and Trump does not want to have any part of that. And so last time around, people thought that, hey, why is he talking about the love letters from the North Korean leader? How does that serve American interests if he's saying he loves President Xi as well, a brutal dictator? And so that is something that he's having to kind of temper his expectations of. Just, you can't stop a war in one day in Ukraine, and it has to be fair, and you can't just let Russia rearm to start again in a few years.
And a lot of people say he's transactional, that he is a president who does what is right for America at the time.
Yeah, and he's a businessman. So businessmen is they're always about what's good for me is we can figure out a way in the middle as a negotiation tactic. And so I do think with some of his moves, I had a story 2 days ago about how he's changing the colors of the White House badges to be platinum and gold from the blue and green that have traditionally been there. And so people on Twitter were saying, how is this going to lower the cost of eggs?
Right.
How is this going to help the average American? And so, and Trump himself has lowered expectations. He said he can't address the price hikes with, basically with a magician. You can't just like wave a wand. It's not Harry Potter where just the prices go down. And so we live in a capitalist economy, and presidents don't have that much control of that. Of course, he was not going to say that during the campaign when he wanted to lay all of the issues on the feet of the Biden and Harris administration.
One of the things it seems he can perhaps wave a wand over is he says he's going to pardon the January 6th rioters, protesters, Trump supporters, whatever you want to call them, that stormed the Capitol during when they were certifying the results of the election victory that Joe Biden won when Trump was defeated. That was a very bleak day for Americans. Trump has come out and said he's going to pardon, is it some 1,600, I think, supporters, some who've been convicted of crimes, everything from assaulting police officers to carrying weapons. Is that something he can do?
Yes, he can. And so a lot of his supporters, they've kind of rewritten history and saying, oh, it's a peaceful walk in the park and that there was no violence. And instead, we know the facts, which is just Trump hung around the TV watching it like a movie and did not make any attempts to stop it for hours. What is going to be interesting is to see is do they pardon the actual violent protesters and rioters? Because J.D. Vance has said a few days ago that they should not be pardoned. And so you would have to think that Vance has talked to Trump and made sure that he's not going to be on a different page about that they're not going to just pardon those people who actually committed acts of violence instead of just strolling in. If you're beating a police officer, hard for Trump to be seen as legitimate on, hey, he's the law and order president, if he's going to let people just beat up cops who are very popular in American society, especially among Republicans.
Of course. All right, Daniel Lippman, thank you so much for joining us. We have so much to talk about. We'll be bringing you all the pomp and